good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be joining us from after one short week off for a United States holiday, one of our favorite Jason United States holidays because it's food oriented. We're back, LinkedIn live streamed. I'm Dave Russell, joined as I usually am by Jason Buffington. How are you doing today, Jason?
I am richly blessed and 5 pounds heavier. Thank you. And how are you?
I am very good. Yeah, if you're not familiar with the United States holiday of Thanksgiving, this basically begins the holiday gauntlet between U.S. Thanksgiving and then Christmas and all of the various typically festivities in between. Obviously, that'll be amended because of current world conditions. However, food is the name of the game for the next few weeks. So, speaking of geography, Jason, probably without further ado, one of the things that we always like to do is quickly reference our world map, see where everyone might be coming from globally. We'll hit this a few different times, but if we can just see where we might be at. I'm in Colorado. Jason, you're in Texas. Our producer, Mark, is down in Georgia. We've got one of our production assistants you can see here in Europe. Just drop a comment to say hi from wherever you may be from. And absolutely, if you have a question or a comment about what we're going to be discussing, please do that as well, meaning enter that in the LinkedIn comments. And if you're watching this later on, we actually have 3-4 times as many people that will watch after the live event has concluded. Feel to drop in a comment there about where in the world you may have tuned in from as well. And we'll come back to this technology from time to time. So for today, our topic, Jason, is looking at kind of cloud usage in the availability space. We're nearly turn of year. I mean, it's not a stretch to say we're in December. I know technically it's November, but we're like inches away, December. Right? So as soon as you hit December, again, given holidays, it seems like time accelerates. And before you know it, we are literally in the next year. I think we'd all like to wake up 2021. It's completely different than 2020. However, we know from a pandemic perspective, economic perspective, that's unlikely to be entirely true. However, we do have some learnings that we can apply, can't we, from this COVID-19 era as we transition into a new year?
Yeah, the in the green room, in the conversation we had prior to coming online, we were talking about how the family holiday will probably never be the same as it was in this COVID world, and arguably the acceleration that we've seen in IT over the last several months, we are not going back to the ways of old, and this is another area where we have been forced to evolve, perhaps in ways that were originally uncomfortable. The data that you're actually looking at here, so this is actually the first non-Veeam people to see data from our new annual report that comes out. So each year we ask a third-party research firm to go and ask several hundred folks. In this case, all enterprises, what's currently going on in your environment? What are your plans for next year? One of the questions we asked was around how did COVID affect cloud adoption? And Dave, you and I have talked about for months around the idea that you couldn't go into the data center. You couldn't go into the building, right? And so any IT initiative that you had that was based on racking and stacking gear, those were dead. And arguably, they still are. For a lot of folks, even if the IT pro folks are coming back in the data center, the supply chain has not caught up yet. There's a lot of things like hard drives and memory that appliances are still just not hitting shelves and shipping docks at a store near you. And so this was actually really interesting that COVID, when we asked folks about cloud adoption, this actually holds true. So if you take a look at that data, 36% of organizations said they significantly increased their use of cloud services in response to it. I don't think the question's actually on here, but basically it asked in the first months of the global pandemic between March and July of 2020, how would you characterize your organization's IT strategy when it came to cloud services? And so that first piece, 36%, right, said significantly increased, 39% said moderately increased, and I've been off, so add those two together. So 75%-ish.
Yeah, a full 3/4. No, that's exactly so. I mean, that's significant by anyone's statistics.
Yeah, and then 18% said they slightly increased, right? So maybe the other way to look at this is write this down, only 7% of organizations did not increase their use of cloud in partial response to COVID. Right. And again, kind of like the Thanksgiving meal that may not ever be quite the same as what we did in yesteryear. we're not going back. Right? People are not going to be saying, hey, let's get our data back out of the cloud now that we can walk into a data center without a hazmat suit on. And so certainly we've seen some rapid acceleration that I think is going to be interesting to how we all change our IT strategy and landscape.
We're both optimists, Jason. I like to think, what are some of the silver linings associated with this pandemic timeframe? And again, not to be pessimistic, but I don't think the first half of the next year looks dramatically different than what we're experiencing right now today. And I'd love to be proven wrong, but just realistically, the current situation is going to remain current situation for some time. So this is part of why we want to kind of talk about a little bit of the realities of where we're at now, specifically with regards to cloud. And to your point, some of this is here to stay. Arguably, the silver lining can be many organizations were experimenting, dabbling, trialing things. I think now we're starting to hit a transition point, inflection point, where we're going to start to see increasingly more workloads born in the cloud, more aggressive lift and shift. No one really likes to say lift and shift, but that's oftentimes what it starts out like. Maybe that's not the goal to end on. So, I'm curious on your perspective on COVID and cloud. Do you think what the survey results we saw, does that strike you as a temporal blip, meaning like half a year from now, if we were to survey that, would that look completely different or no?
No, and in fact, the thing I think you think about is, and this goes back to that Thanksgiving dinner conversation. In the Thanksgiving conversation, the question is, do we go back to the old way of doing things for the family meal moving forward? In the case when we talk about hybrid cloud, no one is talking about hybrid cloud as if we are settling, right? So this is not about doing the next best thing for IT. This is about accelerating the kinds of innovation and modernization that you were already planning on doing anyway. You just accelerate it. So this is not settling at all. We talk about how hybrid and cloud are here. We just got there faster than we thought we might have because we had an external forcing function. So for that reason alone, I don't think it's temporal. It's just accelerate evolution. If you've ever seen any of the X-Men mutant movies, same kind of concept.
Yes, science fiction and backup recovery IT, they have a lot of parallels to them. I like that one in particular. So let's take a quick look at our global map. I think we've got some people that have chimed in. Oh, we clearly have some new additions here.
Nice.
It's always fun, Jason, when we get some of these larger geographies, like Canada, obviously, in this case, it lights up a lot of the world green. But we've got, in the United States alone, we've got Atlanta, Miami has come into the situation, Louisville, Kentucky, I think that's the one since we last spoke. Obviously Canada right there. If we start to look at rest of world, we've got Israel, Turkey, Wales in the UK. We've got Tahiti. And a little warmer client. I think that might be a first, Jason. Am I mistaken on that, or do you recall that one?
Month's podcast from Tahiti, live, Veeam Live Tahiti. I think that would be fantastic.
I think we could socially distance on a warm beach in Tahiti just fine. I think that's pretty great. And then you can see, in addition, we've got Angola, which is something that we don't always see. Serbia, I failed to mention earlier when I just got so wrapped up on Tahiti as I believe a first time viewer. So thank you for that. We'll hit this a couple times. So, as you have time, just drop in a comment. And again, if you have a question or comment on what Jason and I are chatting on, feel free to ping in that as well. And again, if you're, watching a replay of this, of which so many of our followers do, generally we ask you to do that as well, because we do like to see what the trends look like over time. And we've been, to steal your phrase, Jason, richly blessed in that I think this is what our 29th Industry Insights episode that we've done over, many, many months now. So we've seen a lot during this interesting 2019. But the interest remains strong, and we're very grateful for that. Now, I want to give a preface, because I know this is Jason's favorite slide in this research that we do, and it's mine as well, meaning arguably our single favorite question that we ask every single year. We call it the money slide, is what would drive you to change your primary backup solution or service? And if we could bring up the chart, I will apologize in advance. It's an eye chart for sure, but that's okay. We're going to decompose it, and Jason and I are going to riff on this. We're going to unpack this from a different perspective in future episodes, meaning dig into what have the trends been historically, what seems surprising with this new research data or highly consistent. But Jason, just in the context of our topic, meaning we're looking at cloud in the next year, 2021. I just put a semi-arbitrarily, and I'll tell you why it's semi-arbitrarily, some boxes around a few of these, 3 of them in particular. The reason I call it semi-arbitrarily is you could make a case that cloud could participate or influence a response in multiple different areas on this single question. But some are more explicit than others. And the bottom, you can see the legend. The punchline, if it's a little small for you, is that the most recent data is in the green or top bar, and that's how these are stack ranked in the order you see them. But about number 5 there is the main reason at number 5 that you would be driven to change your solution or service for backup is to move from on-prem data protection to cloud-based data protection service. And to your point, Jason, on the COVID and impact on cloud in the prior pie chart, pretty dramatic movement year over year and not one that we're thinking really slows down.
Yeah, and for folks at home, I hope you take a screenshot of this one because there's a lot of things in here that we are going to unpack in more than one way overall. Let me just kind of draw your eye to a couple things. You've got 2 rather long green bars, right? So the darkest green bar, that is the upcoming data for the data protection research for 2021. The lighter green is what it was a year ago. So just looking at when there's a variance in that is always interesting. And then the yellow is when you can only pick one. Right, so you can pick more than one in either the green ones, but when you pick just one, it's in the yellow. And I do think there's some really interesting things in here. Certainly that appetite for leveraging the cloud for data protection, the same way that we just got done talking about leveraging the cloud for everything else in IT is part of that. When you look at whether that's because you want the fulfillment of cloud-based backup or whether you just want changing from CapEx to OpEx, whether you want to and that's the easy ones. But if you look down that list, improving reliability is in yellow. It's the top choice. And one of the things we've certainly seen over time is even if the cloud is not the least expensive way, no one ever said the cloud is cheap, right? But you get some really great outcomes from that, in part because you got smarter humans running that data center day in and day out that's purpose built. And I think when you start saying, how do I improve reliability? One of the ways you can do that is by leveraging data protection technology by data protection experts running in a cloud. The way that you get better agility, the way that you reduce your hardware and software costs. There's a lot of reasons why, secondarily, you're going to leverage the cloud as part of that. And so it's exciting to see this kind of backs that up, pun intended, of course.
Yeah, great point. Great point. I'm just going to mention one other quick thing on this chart, and I do want to get to a comment that's come in and then a little sort of a commercial for the current version of this research data. You can see the bottom one that I highlighted is to move from cloud-based data protection service to on-prem data protection solution. And I just thought in the interest of fairness, there are workloads that are some cases moving back on-prem. This is where data portability and data mobility can become important for, to Jason's point, and as our CTO, I mixed in chief and got into TO, but our chief technology officer likes to say the cloud is not a charity. We know this. If you've ever paid the bill or monitored that, you know this to be true. This is why cloud monitoring programs exist. Management solutions exist to help you manage this cost. So there can be valid reasons to bring data back. And so having a solution that enables the bidirectional flow of data can be really important. But for some, trading off OpEx and CapEx in the middle, that's why I highlighted that. Maybe it's a short-term consideration of, I want to delay current infrastructure investment for a period of time because it's been a challenging economic time frame, and it might well continue to be for a few more quarters. So the OpEx model works well for us, but long term, maybe we have some sensitive data that we would prefer to maintain in-house. So we do have a comment and a question. Jason, actually, I will let you handle the first question from Naz because I think you've got a unique perspective on what he's asking.
Yeah, so Naz makes a comment on the ability to integrate third-party applications through an API framework. And if you aren't familiar with that, one of I think my main goals in life is backupless backup, where you don't think about backup as a secondary set of activities that you do after you set up the production environment. It really ought to be a well-integrated part of the primary ecosystem, whether that's because of VM tags or whether that's because of your Kubernetes policies, but you really want to integrate backup into a broader systems management framework. And that's what Naz's comment is on. In fact, if you want to see some examples of how folks have been doing that, every year about this time, we do what's called the Veeam Innovation Awards. And often some of the solutions that we celebrate are solutions where third parties, partners and providers have built whole data protection solutions and outcomes on top of the Veeam platform. And you never see a Veeam UI. You're doing the whole thing through APIs and web portals, et cetera. And so everyone should act surprised because the nomination window for VIAs will open sometime next week. But I don't think I'm allowed to tell people that. So we'll edit this out of the thing later. But yes, so it is that season again. But yes, we I can't think of anything you can do that you can't do through the API. In fact, there's many advanced functions are only API or PowerShell enabled. So Naz, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I'll double down on that just because, like most pathetic, highly wired individuals, I keep a pair of glasses in my phone by my bed, and I get them on. I start going through social media and email just to see what's happened. And one of the first tweets I saw, though, is one of our vanguards, and I'll actually define as a teaser, Jason and I will, what a Veeam vanguard is, but an external person to Veeam, who happens to be kind of something of a proponent or an influencer for Veeam. They have a great tweet that they sent out where they took version 11 early access code around our enhanced instant recovery or IR capabilities, in this case for NAS, and we're able to use some of the API integrations with being able to do things like go publish off of your production NAS into another system, so you're not impacting production at all, and scan that for malware and or even forensically look for certain images. So nice. You can use third-party software to see if there's a picture of a certain kind, if depending on what the nature of your work is. So just making the point, Jason's absolutely right. The Veeam Innovation Awards highlight this, but we even have ongoing technical previews now where people are already starting to consume even more and more deeply some of the existing capabilities and leveraging some of the newer capabilities even before we hit GA.
There are some truly scary smart vanguards in our community that are wickedly legit. Yeah.
No, they absolutely are. And boy, I'll take a shot at this next question. There you go. Nice. Way to represent. So question from Edgar, and I'll probably give a commercial. Jason, you can give a non-commercial answer. Usually we try to keep this not too much of a Veeam commercial. But the question is, what is the best solution to manage multi-cloud from general purpose perspective industries? And I'm going to have a hard time saying why it shouldn't be Veeam. And I'm going to give you a quick reason why. In that I alluded to it. Jason, the idea of moving data, in some cases, lower on the list, but move data back from cloud on-prem made the list in terms of why you might switch backup solutions. I think if 2020 has shown us anything, that you have to be prepared to have a frictionless environment where you can get data from one locale to another, in some cases in advance of even being able to understand why that might be. In other words, you just have to have that capability. And sometimes I like to say it's okay to say 2020 took us by surprise. We're literally a few weeks away from 2021. We don't get to be surprised anymore in IT. So the notion of managing a multi-cloud environment, which by the way can include private cloud, in my opinion, or definition of multi-cloud and hybrid cloud, it encompasses the data center as well, or meaning on-prem. Yep. So Veeam, by virtue of having a portable data format and writing data in a self-describing way, gives you the horizontal ability to reduce the friction from moving workloads from one locale to another. And I think ultimately that's the name of the game going forward, is get the right data at the right place. And in some cases, we won't know in advance where that location should be. So with
Yeah.
that,
Can
go
I
ahead.
can
Yeah,
I raise
don't
it
rip
up
on
just a hair? I mean, because if you think about it, if you think about consuming the cloud, it's not going to be that much longer before you think about consuming cloud. In some cases, like you think about consuming electricity or consuming water, you know, the difference is that truly is a commoditized offering. One cloud is not going to commoditize another, right? There will always be some things that Amazon does better than Azure. There are some things that Google platform is going to do better than Amazon, right? So you should not be thinking about cloud as a commoditized platform, but you should be thinking about, you should be putting each of the right workloads on the right platforms based on whether you need better search indexes, whether you need better locale for geo-sovereignty. There are reasons why you pick one hyperscale cloud versus another, but you shouldn't have to settle in how you deliver IT services because of the cloud that you chose. And so when you think about it that way, workloads ought to move from one cloud to another based on the demands of the business and what's right for that workload. But you better make sure that you have a consistent data protection mechanism that works so that the data that was on one cloud or on-prem last month, as it goes to the next cloud or on-prem next month, data protection is consistent. Your SLAs are consistent. Your retention is consistent because you need your compliance to be consistent. So there's places where you should have fluidity. Your data protection tool of choice should not be one of them. So that's my speech.
Well said. Well said. And before we hit the world map, which we should do very soon here, we did another question from Amit, who said, I think he's saying, can you briefly talk about the bundled solution with Nutanix? That is a solution called Nutanix Mine with Veeam. It's some time ago, but I did do a LinkedIn live stream with Nutanix that covered that solution. And if you're not familiar with it, we take a Nutanix hyper-converged solution that you may be familiar with. And if you're not familiar with it, Nutanix really invented the hyper-converged notion. Through the Prism interface or the management interface associated with Nutanix, we can then insert the Veeam availability suite offering the capabilities Jason just mentioned. In some cases, we have people that favor that solution just because it's an interesting scale-out, software-defined, extensible platform, an engine that runs Veeam extremely well. In other cases, there are organizations that have settled on Nutanix as their preferred HCI and infrastructure solution. From a management perspective, going back to Jason's notion of consistency, they just like the investment they've made, the training they understand in that platform, and being able to leverage that across both primary and secondary workloads. And Jason, as we like to talk about during appliances, it's nice not to have a stranded appliance, meaning you could certainly leverage that solution for some other purpose. It's not relabeled, say, super micro kit that the only thing it can really ever do is run one specific backup software.
Yeah, and in fact, by coincidence, I think I'm actually doing another joint session with Nutanix in a couple of weeks, and we're going to be talking about kind of two things. One, certainly if you are modernizing your on-prem data center and you're leveraging the Nutanix platform as building blocks for that, when you modernize production, you have to modernize protection. I have been saying that for years. Somebody needs to print me some T-shirts or a bumper sticker for that one of these days. But and so certainly for some folks, as you're really embracing hyperconverged, not just for consolidation, but for agility, you should be thinking about modern data protection that's built for that as well. In other cases, and for that, we have Veeam for Nutanix to back up those environments. In other cases, though, if you just want faster time to value, we often talk about Veeam being a purely software-defined solution. We are not limited by the hardware that some solutions and white boxes are built upon. But if you do want that appliance form factor outcome, we partnered with that hyper-converged leader in Nutanix and said, okay, let's build a Mine, M-I-N-E, that actually does give you that turnkey outcome that many folks are looking for. We got one more question before we hit the map. So Abdelkader asked about, do we have automated tools for recovering data from a legacy backup solution? And then and the question is, how do you get the data out of that platform without having to use that tool before you can start leveraging it with Veeam? And unfortunately, In most cases, there's not a way to do that. And in fact, we've heard stories for years. Dave and I have both been in the industry for more than 30 years each. And often what you see is you have to continue to pay maintenance on some version of that legacy product if you ever need to be able to recover data out of those tapes or off of those drives. Again, that's actually not true with Veeam. So for organizations that leverage Veeam, our format, you can even use the free tool and pull anything out that you want. By the way, it can be API, it can be PowerShell. You can automate that entire work stream as best you like. That's not true with a lot of the other folks. And it's one of the worst forms of vendor lock-in is no matter how far away you want to separate yourself from that legacy tool, you got to have at least one copy of it still running with maintenance on it in order to be able to suck that data back out if you ever needed it. So
yeah, quick double click on that because that's an interesting one. That extract utility that Jason mentions, we earlier this year, it's probably very early, like February, March, or somewhere around that time frame, we make that extract utility separately downloadable. So think of it as a PDF reader. Your ability to get out of or escape Veeam is incredibly fast. You don't even have to have a full Veeam instance to do that. Or you could download our no charge, meaning free, community edition. So we've taken pains not to contribute to the lock. Now let me answer it in a different way. There's some specialized solutions. I know there's a little bit smaller provider called StoneRAM out of UK. The best known one for converting data formats is Index Engines. IBM acquired a company called Butterfly Software that they've, I think, since sunsetted that capability. But the long story short is, why is that so hard? Well, I'll tell you, the main reason it's very, very difficult is, in addition to changing backup formats, as Jason alluded to, these are proprietary formats that can change over releases or even patches within a release level. And that's not even the punchline. The punchline is that if you try to go and extract that data from that backup, the problem is you don't even know, especially Veeam, we don't know if that other third-party backup was even successful. So there might have been some issue with contamination, corruption, other issues that now get exhibited at restore time or conversion time that weren't known possibly even years prior. So actually, I love having all the questions. Keep them coming. We do also in version 11 have a kind of a corollary on this. We do have a tape copy capability coming up in version 11 to make sure from a media perspective, and we still very much support actively our own native development of physical tape. We can get into the debates about what's appropriate, cloud, flash, disk, tape. The Veeam answer is they're all appropriate, so we invest heavily in all of them. But let's hit the world map, because I do think we've got a couple new places that have come in. Jason, maybe parse this through. Oh, yeah, I do see some more green.
So what do we got? So we got Saudi Arabia's in the house, Germany. Dallas, Texas. We could have done this as coffee. Austria, India, Zambia, Ashburn, Virginia. Very nice, very nice. Hey, I'm just looking at the clock for the first time. We kind of got carried away talking about some of the scenarios, and thank you so much for all those folks that asked questions. When we started this early in the year, we really wanted this to be interactive. So to Abdelkar, to Amit, to Edgar, to Naz, thank you for being part of the conversation. If you have other questions, we will actually answer them in the chat for this week along the way. But I think we're coming close on time. Seems like maybe we need to make this a two-parter. So there's a lot to talk about in hybrid as we get ready for 2021. How about we commit now to another segment on hybrid 2021 planning before Christmas? So we'll make this a multi-segment and cover more data. But Dave, you want to wrap us up? What are we doing on Friday?
Yeah, this Friday we've got discussing this Veeam Vanguard program that I alluded to, which is our sort of almost like Top Guns. Yeah, Jason's representing the merch right there. We've got Rick Vanover and Nikola Peshkova are going to be speaking this Friday on what the program is, what's going to be new in 2021. If you've ever seen anything associated with Rick, and if you follow Veeam, you probably have, he's not to be missed. And double click on what Jason said. I love the idea. We'll revisit this same topic with even more data. But on behalf of Jason and myself, thank you for asking the question sincerely. We actually love that more than trying to cover slides that we've got. So in fact, maybe someday we even just have an open Q&A, sort of ask anything kind of a notion someday. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Stay safe, stay positive, and have a great rest of the day and rest of the week. Bye for now.
Okay.